Hey there, welcome back to Botanic Haven, the place where we talk all things gardening, plant care, and creating those gorgeous green spaces that make your home and outdoor areas feel truly alive. Whether you're tending a tiny balcony garden or have a big backyard to play with, this channel is your go-to spot for practical, down-to-earth advice that actually works. And today we're diving into something really exciting, because March is here, and that means it's time to get your hands dirty. A lot of people think March is too early to plant anything meaningful. I used to think the same thing, honestly. I'd stand in my garden in early spring looking at the cold soil and talk myself out of planting because I assumed nothing would survive. Then a neighbour of mine, let's call her Daisy, handed me a bunch of radish seedlings she'd started in the first week of March and said, just try it. 2 weeks later, those radishes were already pushing up green sprouts, and by the end of the month, we were eating fresh salads. That experience completely changed how I think about early spring gardening. Daisy has been growing vegetables for over 30 years, and she always says the same thing. The gardeners who eat the best in spring are the ones who weren't afraid to plant when everyone else was still sitting inside waiting for warmer days. She's absolutely right about that. March is actually a golden window. The soil is starting to warm up, the days are getting longer, and a lot of vegetables genuinely thrive in cool weather. They don't just survive, they love it. The key is knowing which ones to plant, and that's exactly what we're going to walk through today. 15 vegetables that grow fast, respond well to early spring conditions, and will have you harvesting in no time. Some of these you might already know, but there are a few surprises in here that even experienced gardeners overlook. And throughout this guide, I'll be sharing little tips, personal observations, and some stories from real gardeners who figured out what works and are kind enough to pass that knowledge along. Let's start with radishes because, honestly, they deserve the top spot every single time. These little guys are probably the fastest growing vegetable you can possibly grow in a home garden. We're talking 20 to 30 days from seed to harvest for many varieties. That's less than a month. You plant them, you almost blink, and suddenly you've got crunchy, peppery radishes ready to pull. They prefer cooler temperatures, ideally between 50 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Which makes March absolutely perfect for them. Just sow them directly into the soil about half an inch deep, give them an inch of space between seeds, water consistently, and let them do their thing. Cherry Belle and French Breakfast are two classic varieties that do incredibly well in early spring. Don't overthink it. Radishes are the vegetable that forgives beginners and rewards everyone. One thing I'll add here is that radishes also make excellent companion plants. Tuck them in between rows of slower growing vegetables like carrots or beets, and they'll be harvested long before the other plants need the space. It's a clever way to maximize every inch of your garden. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Next up, let's talk about spinach. Spinach is one of those vegetables that people associate with summer salads, but here's the truth. Spinach actually prefers cool weather and can even tolerate a light frost. It starts struggling when temperatures climb above 75 degrees, so planting in March gives you that ideal growing window before summer heat sets in. Spinach grows remarkably fast. You can expect baby leaves in about 25 to 30 days, and full-sized leaves in 40 to 50 days. The trick with spinach is to sow it thickly and then thin it out. A friend of mine named Oliver used to scatter spinach seeds almost like he was seasoning a dish. A little chaotic, but it worked beautifully. He'd thin the seedlings when they were a couple inches tall, eating the thinnings in a salad right away. Nothing wasted. Keep the soil moist and give them a spot with partial shade if your March afternoons get warm, and you'll have a steady supply of tender greens. Oliver also told me something that stuck with me. He always mixes a little aged compost into the planting row before sowing spinach seeds, and he swears it makes a noticeable difference in how quickly and vigorously the plants establish themselves. Spinach is a light feeder overall, but it responds really well to that initial boost of organic matter right at its roots. Lettuce is another March superstar that often gets overlooked in favour of more dramatic vegetables like tomatoes or peppers. But here's the thing, lettuce is incredibly rewarding because it grows quickly, it's versatile in the kitchen, and it can be cut and come again, meaning you don't have to pull the whole plant at once. Loose leaf varieties like black-seeded Simpson or oak leaf are especially good for this. You cut the outer leaves and the plant keeps producing from the center. In March, direct sow or transplant seedlings into a spot that gets at least 4 to 6 hours of sun. Lettuce germinates best in soil that's around 60 to 65 degrees, and it'll go from seed to first harvest in about 30 to 45 days, depending on the variety. One tip I've learned over years of growing it: don't bury the seeds deep. Lettuce seeds need light to germinate, so just press them lightly onto the soil surface and barely cover them with a fine layer of soil or vermiculite. If you're growing in containers, lettuce is one of the absolute best choices. It has shallow roots, doesn't need deep soil, and can be grown in a window box, a long planter, or even a repurposed wooden crate. Rose, a gardener I know who lives in a small apartment, grows 3 or 4 varieties of lettuce simultaneously in planters on her balcony, and she harvests fresh greens for her dinner almost every evening from March through June. Peas are something I look forward to every single year, and March is the time to get them in the ground. They're a cool season crop that genuinely does not do well in summer heat, so if you wait too long, you'll miss your window. Snap peas, snow peas, and shelling peas all fall into this category. They can handle light frosts. Actually, a frost after germination seems to toughen them up and help them thrive. Sugar snap is probably the most popular variety for home gardens because the pods are sweet, crisp, and you can eat them whole without shelling. Peas are climbers, so put up a simple trellis or even just some sticks and twine, and they'll happily grow upward. From seed to harvest is typically 60 to 70 days, which means if you plant in early March, you're looking at a May or early June harvest. A gardener I know named Lucas swears by soaking his pea seeds overnight before planting. He says it speeds up germination noticeably, and from what I've seen in my own garden, he's not wrong. Lucas also adds something I find really smart. He inoculates his pea seeds with rhizobiobacteria before planting, especially if he's planting in a new bed. These beneficial bacteria form a relationship with pea roots and help fix nitrogen from the air into the soil, which feeds the plants and improves the soil for everything that comes after. You can find rhizobia inoculant at most garden centres, and it costs almost nothing. It's one of those small investments that pays off in a big way. Kale might not be the most glamorous vegetable, but it's become a genuine favourite among home gardeners who want something both nutritious and fast-growing in spring. Kale actually tastes better after a frost. The cold converts some of its starches to sugars, making the leaves sweeter and more tender. Planting in March means your kale will experience some cold nights that only improve its flavour. It germinates in as little as 5 to 7 days under the right conditions and can be ready for harvest in 55 to 75 days, though you can start snipping baby leaves much earlier than that. Lacinato kale, also called dinosaur kale, is a beautiful variety with dark, bumpy leaves that hold up well in salads and soups. Red Russian kale is another gorgeous option with frilly, reddish-green leaves that almost look decorative in the garden. Plant kale in full sun for the best results, and don't be afraid to harvest often. The more you pick, the more the plant produces. One thing that surprises a lot of new kale growers is how large the plants can eventually get. Give them at least 18 inches of space between plants if you're planning to let them grow through the season. A crowded kale patch leads to poor air circulation, which invites fungal issues, and nobody wants that. Arugula is one of those vegetables that surprises people with how fast it grows. You can go from seed to harvest in as little as 30 to 40 days, and the peppery, slightly nutty flavour it adds to salads and pizzas is unlike anything you can buy at the store. March is ideal because arugula bolts, meaning it goes to seed and turns bitter, quickly in warm weather. The cool temperatures of early spring keep it in that perfect tender stage for much longer. Sow seeds directly into the garden about 1/4 inch deep and keep the soil consistently moist. One thing I always tell people about arugula: don't plant too much at once unless you're cooking for a crowd. A small patch can produce more than you expect. Consider succession planting, sowing a small amount every 2 weeks, so you have a continuous harvest rather than a huge amount all at once. Arugula flowers, by the way, are completely edible and have a milder peppery flavour than the leaves. When your plants eventually bolt, don't just pull them, harvest the flowers and scatter them over a salad. It's a small, lovely thing that makes the kitchen garden feel connected to the table in a really direct way. Turnips are criminally underrated in the early spring garden. People think of them as old-fashioned heavy winter food, but young turnips harvested in spring are entirely different. Mild, slightly sweet, and tender enough to eat raw in slices. They grow fast, with small varieties ready in about 35 to 45 days, and both the roots and the greens are edible, so you're essentially getting two vegetables in one plant. Tokyo Cross is a wonderful white variety that matures quickly and has that mild flavour that even turnip skeptics tend to enjoy. Plant seeds about ½ inch deep and 3 inches apart, thin them as they grow, and eat the thinnings as greens. Keep the soil evenly moist to prevent the roots from becoming woody or cracking. Turnip greens, especially from young plants, are actually one of the most nutritious greens you can grow, rich in vitamins and minerals, and wonderful braised with a little garlic and olive oil. If you've only ever eaten turnips roasted or mashed and found them too strong, try pulling them young before they're fully mature and taste them raw. It's a completely different experience. Beets are another root vegetable that thrives in the cool soil of Mâche. They take a little longer than radishes, typically 50 to 70 days, but they're incredibly productive, and both the roots and leaves are useful in the kitchen. Beet greens are actually quite similar to Swiss chard and can be sautéed or added to soups. One thing that trips up a lot of beginner gardeners with beets is that each seed is actually a cluster of seeds, meaning multiple plants will sprout from one spot. You have to thin them to about 3 to 4 inches apart so they have room to develop properly. A woman named Rose, who lives down the street from me, has been growing beets every March for 20 years. She always says the secret is consistent watering. Beets that dry out and then get a big drink tend to crack. Keep the moisture level steady and you'll be pulling gorgeous, earthy beets by late spring. Rose also introduced me to a golden beet variety called Boldor, and I haven't looked back since. Golden beets have all the sweetness of red beets without staining everything in your kitchen, and they're just as fast-growing and reliable. If you've never tried them, put them on your planting list this March. Swiss chard deserves a mention here because it bridges the gap between a fast-growing leafy green and a longer-season vegetable beautifully. The outer leaves can be harvested in as little as 30 days, while the plant continues growing for months. It handles both cool spring weather and warmer summer temperatures better than most greens, which makes it a versatile addition to any March planting plan. Rainbow chard, with its vivid red, yellow, orange and white stems, is almost too pretty for a vegetable garden. It looks like a flower arrangement. Plant seeds about ½ inch deep and 6 inches apart, and once plants are a few inches tall, harvest by cutting outer stalks at the base. The centre will keep pushing out new growth all season long. I've had Swiss chard plants produce continuously from a March planting all the way through October, which is extraordinary value for one small seed. If you're limited on space and want something that just keeps on giving, chard is your answer. Bok choy is a wonderful cool season green that many Western gardeners overlook, and that's a real missed opportunity. It grows fast, around 45 to 60 days to maturity, and thrives in the cool temperatures of early spring before bolting in summer heat. Baby bok choy can be harvested even earlier, around 30 days, and is fantastic in stir-fries, soups, or even roasted in the oven with a little garlic and olive oil. Direct sow or transplant into well-draining soil with plenty of organic matter. One thing to watch for with bok choy in March is slugs. They absolutely love young bok choy plants. A ring of diatomaceous earth around the base of plants helps deter them, or you can set out slug traps if they're really becoming a problem in your garden. Ivy, a friend of mine who grew up cooking with bok choy and only started gardening in her 30s, told me that once she started growing her own, she couldn't believe the flavour difference. Store-bought bok choy is often harvested too early and shipped long distances, and by the time it reaches your kitchen, it has lost a significant amount of its freshness. Garden-fresh bok choy, picked the same day you cook it, has a sweetness and crunch that's on a completely different level. Kohlrabi is one of those vegetables that looks like it came from another planet. That round, bulbous stem with leaves shooting out from it in every direction. Kids love looking at it. It's a member of the Brassica family and absolutely loves cool weather, making March planting ideal. It grows relatively quickly, with bulbs ready in about 45 to 60 days, and it can be eaten raw like an apple, crisp, mildly sweet and slightly reminiscent of broccoli stem. Peel off the tough outer skin, slice it thin, and it's a great snack with a little salt or hummus. Plant seeds about 1/4 inch deep and space them about 5 to 6 inches apart. Kohlrabi doesn't like to be crowded, and the bulbs can get woody and tough if they're left in the ground too long. So harvest them when they're about the size of a tennis ball. Purple Vienna and white Vienna are the two most commonly grown varieties, and both perform wonderfully in early spring. The purple variety tends to be slightly slower to mature, but has a beautiful colour that makes it almost ornamental in the garden bed. Green onions, also called scallions or spring onions, are one of the most practical things you can grow in Mâche because they take up almost no space and can be harvested in as little as 20 to 30 days from transplant, or about 60 to 70 days from seed. They can be started indoors in February and moved outside in March, which is actually how a lot of gardeners get a jump on the season. Plant them densely, pull them as you need them, and replant in the cleared spaces. It's an endlessly productive little cycle. The entire plant is edible. Roots included if you're feeling adventurous. My friend Ivy grows a pot of scallions on her kitchen windowsill year-round, but she started doing it in earnest after her first outdoor Mâche planting taught her just how simple and rewarding they are. One trick she shared with me: after you buy a bunch of scallions from the grocery store, instead of eating the root ends, save them and plant them directly in a pot. They'll regrow within a week and give you another harvest. It's not quite as productive as starting fresh from seed, but it's a perfect low-effort introduction to growing your own food, especially for beginners or kids. Cilantro is a fast-growing herb vegetable that belongs in this list because it's not just a cooking herb, it's a full-flavoured leafy green that bolts to seed quickly in warm weather, making March the best time to grow it. In cool spring weather, cilantro stays leafy and lush for much longer than it would in summer, giving you weeks of those fragrant, bright green leaves for salsas, curries and salads. Sow seeds directly into the garden. Cilantro has a taproot that makes it difficult to transplant successfully. Scatter the seeds lightly, barely cover them, water gently, and you'll see sprouts within 7 to 10 days. One thing I'll mention about cilantro that surprises a lot of people: the seeds you sow are actually dried fruit pods containing 2 seeds each, so gently crushing them before planting can actually improve your germination rate. It sounds fussy, but it takes about 10 seconds and makes a real difference. When it does eventually bolt, let it. Coriander seeds are a wonderful spice in their own right, and the plant will self-seed and come back on its own in following seasons. A self-seeding cilantro patch is one of the easiest, lowest maintenance things you can establish in a kitchen garden, and once it's going, it practically takes care of itself. Mustard greens are a bit underappreciated in home gardens, but they're incredibly fast-growing, ready in as little as 25 to 40 days. And the flavour is wonderful. Peppery, bold and complex. They're a staple in Southern American cooking, as well as in many Asian cuisines, and they hold up well to cooking without falling apart. Red Giant and Tender Green are 2 excellent varieties for early spring planting. Like most of the greens on this list, they bolt quickly in warm weather, so March is your ideal window. Thin them to about 6 inches apart, harvest the outer leaves regularly, and don't be surprised if you end up loving them more than you expected. A lot of people try mustard greens once and wonder why they waited so long to grow them. Lucas told me that he discovered mustard greens entirely by accident. He ordered a mixed salad seed packet and wasn't sure what half the things in it were, but mustard greens ended up being his favourite discovery. Now he plants them every March without fail, and he's converted several of his neighbours in the process. That's the wonderful thing about early spring gardening. You try something new, it works, and suddenly you're the person passing along seeds to everyone you know. And then there's Mâche, also known as corn salad or lamb's lettuce. It's a tiny rosette-forming green with a mild, slightly nutty flavour that's lovely in salads. It grows slowly compared to radishes, but is incredibly cold hardy, which makes March a great time to sow it. It can take 45 to 60 days to reach full size, but the leaves are so tender even when small that you can start harvesting earlier than that. It's one of those plants that doesn't demand much attention. Just plant it, water occasionally, and check on it. It rewards patience and minimal fuss, which honestly makes it perfect for busy people who want a garden but don't have hours to dedicate to it every week. Mâche also makes an excellent ground cover between taller plants. filling in bare soil and suppressing weeds, while providing a continuous harvest of delicate little leaves. If you've never tried it, pick up a small packet of seeds and tuck it into any spare corner of your garden. It's one of those quiet, understated vegetables that earns a permanent place in your spring garden once you try it. Now, beyond all the individual plants, there are a few general practices that will make your March gardening much more successful no matter what you're growing. The first is soil preparation, and I cannot stress this enough. Before you sow a single seed, take a few minutes to work compost or aged manure into your planting area. Cool season vegetables don't need heavily fertilized soil, but they do need good structure. Loose, well-draining, organic-rich soil means better root development, better moisture retention, and faster germination. If your garden beds are heavy clay or very sandy, a generous addition of compost will go a long way toward creating that ideal middle ground. Daisy always says the secret to fast-growing vegetables isn't really about the plants at all. It's about the soil. The plants will do their job if you've done your job first. The second practice is consistent moisture, especially in the early stages of germination. Seeds need moisture to sprout, and if the top layer of soil dries out completely before germination, you'll lose a lot of your seeds. In March, the weather is still unpredictable. You might have several rainy days followed by a dry stretch, or vice versa. Pay attention. Check the soil surface daily if you can, and water lightly whenever the top inch feels dry. Once plants are established and have a few true leaves, they're much more forgiving of occasional dry spells. But in those first couple of weeks, steady moisture is crucial. The third practice is thinning, which is something a lot of gardeners, especially beginners, feel reluctant to do. It feels counterintuitive to pull out perfectly healthy little seedlings when they're growing well, but overcrowding is one of the most common reasons home gardens underperform. Plants that are too close together compete for water, light, and nutrients, and the result is weak, spindly, unproductive plants all around. Give each plant the space it needs, even if that means sacrificing some seedlings. The ones that remain will reward you with noticeably better growth and bigger harvests. The fourth thing is to pay attention to what's actually happening in your specific garden. Every garden is different. The soil, the microclimates, the amount of sun at different times of day, the wind exposure, the drainage. What works perfectly in one spot might struggle in another. Keep a simple garden notebook and jot down what you planted, when you planted it, how it performed, and what you'd do differently next time. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Even a few sentences per week builds up a really valuable record over time that helps you make better decisions each season. Oliver has been keeping a garden notebook for 15 years, and he says flipping back through old entries is one of his favourite things to do on a winter evening. It's like a diary of everything the garden has taught him. One last thing I want to mention before we wrap up is the importance of just getting started, even if conditions aren't perfect. A lot of people wait for the ideal moment, the perfect soil, the perfect weather, the perfect tools, and that moment never quite arrives. But gardening, especially cool season spring gardening, rewards action over perfection. A handful of radish seeds pressed into imperfect soil will still grow into something you can eat. A row of lettuce planted on a slightly overcast March day will still sprout and thrive. The garden is forgiving, and it wants to grow. All it needs is for you to show up and give it a chance. So there you have it, 15 vegetables that are ready to grow right now in March and will reward you with real food faster than you probably expect. The most important thing I want you to take away from all of this is that you don't have to wait for perfect conditions or a warm summer day to start gardening. Cool season crops are some of the most productive, most delicious and most satisfying plants you can grow, and they thrive in exactly the kind of weather March throws at us. Start small if you need to. A pot of radishes, a row of spinach, a handful of pea seeds pushed into the soil. Any of these is a wonderful beginning. And once you taste that first harvest, grown by your own hands from a seed you planted in early spring, something changes. You'll want to keep going. You'll find yourself planning next year's garden before this one is even finished. That's the magic of it. And once it gets you, it never really lets go. Get out there, dig your hands into the soil, and plant something this week. I promise you, in 3 or 4 weeks, when you're pulling your first radishes or snipping your first lettuce leaves, you'll be so glad you started in March. And make sure to come back to Botanic Haven for more practical gardening tips, plant care guides, and inspiration for building those beautiful green spaces, indoors and out, that we all love so much. Happy planting, everyone. See you in the next one.